Hi viewers, hope you are fine and subscribe this channel. I used to believe that love could survive anything. Even silence, even humiliation, even the slow destruction of a woman's confidence, one cruel comment at a time. My name is Elena, and for 15 years, I stayed married to a man who made me feel invisible inside my own home. My ex-husband, Daniel, never screamed at me in public. He never threw things. That's why everyone thought he was the perfect husband. Calm, successful, charming, but behind closed doors, he knew exactly how to break me without leaving bruises. You're too emotional, Elena. You embarrass yourself when you talk too much. No wonder nobody takes you seriously. At first, I argued back. Then I cried. Eventually, I just stayed quiet. And somehow, silence became my personality. The only reason I survived those years was my daughter, Sophie. She was my light in every dark room. Every night after Daniel fell asleep, Sophie would crawl into bed beside me and whisper little stories about school, her dreams, or the books she loved. She was only 12 when she once touched my face and asked softly, "Mom, why do you always look sad around Dad?" That question shattered something inside me. Because children always know, even when adults pretend everything is fine. But I stayed. I told myself I was protecting her. I told myself a broken marriage would hurt her more. I was wrong. By the time Sophie turned 17, Daniel barely hid his disrespect anymore. At family dinners, he mocked the way I dressed. At parties, he interrupted me constantly. One Christmas, in front of his business friends, he laughed and said, "Elena wouldn't survive 1 week without me." Everyone chuckled politely, and I smiled too, because humiliation becomes a habit after enough years. But what I didn't know that night was that Sophie had finally reached her limit. A few months later, Daniel walked into the kitchen with divorce papers already signed. "I'm done pretending," he said coldly. "This marriage has been dead for years." Dead, as if he hadn't been the one slowly killing it. I remember sitting there frozen while he packed his expensive watches and tailored suits like our entire life together meant nothing. Then came the final insult. He looked directly at me and said, "You should be grateful I stayed this long." Grateful, after 15 years of emotional destruction. After sacrificing my career to raise our daughter. After rebuilding him every time his business failed. That night, after he left, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried so hard I could barely breathe. And then, Sophie knocked on the door. Her voice trembled. "Mom," she whispered, "there's something you need to know about Dad." I opened the door expecting comfort. Instead, my daughter revealed a secret that changed everything. Sophie sat at the edge of my bed holding her phone so tightly her hands were shaking. I had never seen fear in her eyes like that before. "Mom," she said carefully, "Dad's been lying to you for years." At first, I thought she meant another woman. Honestly, that would have hurt less. But then she opened her phone and showed me screenshots. Bank transfers, private messages, hidden accounts. Thousands and thousands of dollars moved secretly over the years. My stomach dropped. Daniel had been transferring money into accounts under his brother's name during our marriage. Money I didn't even know existed. While he constantly reminded me that we couldn't afford things, he had been hiding wealth the entire time. I felt physically sick. "But why would he do this?" I whispered. Sophie looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Because he planned to leave you one day." I couldn't speak. Apparently, Sophie discovered everything by accident while helping Daniel organize files on his laptop weeks earlier. At first, she stayed quiet because she was scared. But after watching him humiliate me again and again, she couldn't keep protecting him. That night, something changed inside me. For the first time in years, my pain turned into clarity. Daniel didn't just disrespect me emotionally. He had been preparing to destroy me financially too. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. And for the first time in years, I told the full truth. Not the polished version. Not the "we're having difficulties" version. The truth. Every insult. Every manipulation. Every hidden account. My lawyer listened silently before saying something I will never forget. "Elena, he underestimated you." Those words stayed with me. Because Daniel always believed I was weak. Too soft. Too dependent. Too broken to fight back. But what he forgot was that surviving someone like him for 15 years required strength he never understood. The divorce process became ugly fast. Daniel suddenly transformed into the victim. He told people I was unstable. He claimed I was trying to take his hard-earned money. Even some mutual friends distanced themselves from me. And honestly, that part hurt deeply. Because betrayal from strangers is easier than betrayal from people who once sat at your dinner table. But Sophie never left my side. One evening while we were eating takeout on the living room floor surrounded by legal paperwork, she grabbed my hand and said, "Mom, you spent years protecting everyone else. It's time someone protects you." I cried after she went to bed. Not because I felt weak, but because I realized my daughter had become stronger than I ever allowed myself to be. As months passed, more secrets surfaced. Daniel had manipulated business records, hidden bonuses, even lied about debts, and slowly, the image he spent years building began to crack. People started seeing the man I had lived with all along. Cold, calculated, controlling. But the biggest moment came unexpectedly. Daniel requested a private meeting before the final court hearing. When I arrived at the restaurant, he looked different. Nervous, smaller somehow. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. "We can still settle this quietly." Quietly. That word again. Silence had always been his weapon. But not anymore. I looked him directly in the eyes and calmly said, "You should have treated me better when I was still willing to stay." Silent. For the first time in 15 years. Daniel had no response. The final court hearing lasted less than 2 hours. 2 hours to expose 15 years of lies. The hidden accounts. The financial manipulation. The deliberate attempt to leave me with almost nothing. Daniel sat there avoiding eye contact while evidence after evidence was presented. And suddenly, the confident man who once mocked me in crowded rooms looked terrified. The judge ruled heavily against him. Assets were uncovered, money was traced, and Daniel's carefully constructed image collapsed publicly. But strangely, that wasn't the moment that healed me. I thought revenge would feel explosive, victorious, like fireworks after years of darkness. Instead, it felt quiet, peaceful, like finally putting down a heavy suitcase I'd carried for too long. A few weeks later, Sophie and I moved into a smaller apartment across town. It wasn't luxurious, but for the first time in years, I could breathe inside my own home. No criticism, no walking on eggshells, no shrinking myself to keep someone else comfortable. One morning, I caught myself laughing while making coffee. Real laughter. And it startled me, because I realized I hadn't heard that sound from myself in years. Daniel tried contacting me several times after the divorce. At first, angry messages. Then apologies. Then long emotional emails about mistakes and regret. But by then, something inside me had already changed. I no longer needed him to understand my pain for it to matter. That's the thing about surviving emotional humiliation for years. Eventually, you stop waiting for the person who hurt you to become the person who heals you. And Sophie? She became the greatest blessing of my life. One evening we sat together on our tiny balcony watching the sunset when she suddenly smiled and said, "You look lighter." "Now, Mom," I smiled back, because she was right. I was lighter. Not because Daniel suffered consequences, but because I finally stopped carrying his version of me. The weak version. The dependent version. The woman he trained to doubt herself. That woman disappeared the moment I chose myself. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. Some people don't destroy you all at once. They do it slowly, quietly, until you forget who you were before them. But healing begins the moment you realize their cruelty was never a reflection of your worth. And sometimes, the person who saves you isn't a hero. It's the child who finally whispers the truth you were too afraid to see yourself. My ex-husband spent years humiliating me because he believed I would never leave. What he never expected was that the little girl who watched everything would one day become the reason I finally walked away.